Welcome to another lap guide for the iRacing Camel GT series. This week we're at Mazda Raceway, Laguna Seca. Here's the lap first. All right, so lap time there is a 111.776. Let me fix the interface here real quickly. Couple of things to note before going into the turn-by-turn. Afternoon weather, so we have a track temp of anywhere from high 60s Fahrenheit up to 110 or so Fahrenheit, so about a 40 to 45 degree variance in the track temperatures. When I work on my setups, I like to start with kind of a little bit more of a moderate track temp in between that range. So felt 91 Fahrenheit. This was a good session to test with. And so as always, I will try to create an additional set of setups for the hotter end of that track temp where the car can start to get a little bit more understeery. So also before we go into the turn-by-turn, you may have noticed that I turned the driver's hands off the steering wheel because I think on the initial playback of the lap, it's important to see that turning radius, and it's limited to 90 degrees because the driver hand animations don't animate any further than 90 degrees. So there are a couple of corners where more input is used there. And of course, in the turn-by-turn analysis here, you'll be able to see that even more clearly here with the wheel here up. But I thought it was important to turn that off for the initial lap playback so that that was a little more accurately depicted there in the first lap there. So let's go ahead and go into turn one. So approaching turn 2, the Andretti hairpin. Turn 1 is the little kink here, just at the start, past the start-finish line. So turn 2, the Andretti hairpin, I like to set up on the right-hand side for the braking zone. Threshold brake is just before the 3 or before the line here in the road. So try to get to threshold braking just before that point, about 80%, and then letting off pretty quickly. Starting to also already cheat toward the center of the track here a little bit, and getting ready for the turn-in point, which is going to get the car across the latter part of the curbing. Treat this as a double apex, by the way, the hairpin. But you don't want to apex too soon. The first apex is a little bit of a later apex, so across the latter part of this curbing here. And try not to get the car running too wide, because at this point you actually want to get back to throttle just before the second apex. So just before you get to this curbing, getting back to throttle already. And then keeping moderate throttle as you kind of cross the curbing here until you get the car straightened back up, and of course back to full throttle by that point. So let's go ahead and play that through. And that is down into second gear for the whole corner. So the downshift point was right about here. Of course, because I downshift straight from 5th to 2nd, and if you're doing sequential downshift, you'll just obviously do all your downshifting sequentially here. But if you're like me, you use an H pattern and you want to skip straight down to second gear, the danger with that is be careful not to do it too soon. You'll blow your engine, and so make sure you get the timing on that downshift right. You don't want to do that too soon. I personally like less shifting done and skipping straight to second gear. It's not necessary to do it that way, but I find that less inputs is better, less chance of missed shifts is better, and so that's just my personal preference, but that does come with the risk of blowing the engine if you do that too soon. So that's worth pointing out. So let's play this through at speed. All right, so approaching turn 3, you want to get the car over to the left as quickly as you can. So do that as early as you can get steered back over to the left here. If you do it a little bit more last minute, then you're going to find yourself not getting the car positioned as accurately as you'd like it to be positioned for turn in, and you may not get the car out as wide as it could get placed out here, and that's going to obviously sacrifice the amount of speed you can carry through turn 3. I actually could have used maybe just a little bit more space here as well, and in this particular corner, I think this was probably the one small mistake made in the lap where I put the car into a little bit of a slide. So you'll see right here at turn in, right as I'm coming off the brake and getting the car turned in, it'll slide just a little bit, and you'll actually see me give it a little bit of maintenance throttle there to kind of help balance that out a little bit. And there's a couple of corners I think where I actually give it just a little bit of throttle because I got a little bit more bite, a little bit more oversteer than I would have liked. And as I mentioned, this setup is tuned a little bit more to help deal with understeer, and so you might actually get a little bit more oversteer than you might typically see with some of my setups. And so anyhow, that is something to be aware of. So let's play this through. Actually, before we play it through, let's talk about braking point. Braking point is really between the line and the 2. It's about a 50% or so braking, or I'm sorry, starting at that point. Threshold brake is actually just past the 2. So just as the car is past the 2, about 50% by that point. And that's, of course, where you're going to also start to ease off and now start to turn in. And as you're turning in, you're aiming to use all of the curbing to the right, but don't hit the red curb. In fact, everywhere throughout the track, you want to avoid hitting them. They're great markers and they're great visual cues, but they are really steep and you can take damage on some of them. So you want to get as close to them as you can in many of these corners, but you don't want to hit them. So getting over to the right as close to that as you can so that you can get back to throttle just as you pass, or right at about the point of that apex. You want to be thinking of getting back to throttle at that point, and then reaching full throttle soon after. Aiming to use all of the curb on corner exit. So let's go back through this at speed. So setting up for turn 4, the car's going to be up into 4th gear, and I like to keep 4th gear through the corner there. With race fuel, and especially as it's hotter, you might want to shift down into 3rd. You may not be able to quite carry enough speed for 4th gear to be optimal through here. So in qualifying, and especially as it gets cooler, you're going to be perfectly comfortable, I think, carrying just 4th gear through this corner. So for setting up for the corner, using all of the curbing to the left, opening up the corner as much as you can there. There's going to be a real quick tap of the brakes, and the main purpose of the braking at this point is just to kind of help just shift the weight forward, weight of the car forward a little bit onto the front tires to help get a little bit of bite there for the turn-in point. Now again, just at that point, you'll see that as I have started to turn in, there's going to be another quick blip of the throttle because I felt maybe just a little more oversteer than I would have liked there. And so that can help with balancing the weight of the car where it needs to be so that the car doesn't turn in too sharply if you feel that happening. So that's what you're seeing there with that quick blip of the throttle. Again, through the corner, you're going to plan to use all of the curbing, trying not to touch the red curbing there, and getting back to throttle just as you pass or at that point of the apex, getting back to throttle, and getting back to full throttle pretty quick after that. You're not turning too sharp at this point, and you also actually have a lot of downforce because you're going up over 110 to 15 miles per hour here. So with that extra downforce, that allows you to get back to full throttle a little sooner because you're not going to slide at that speed. So you can get back to the throttle right away. And using all of the exit curbing here, you can get up into the dirt a little bit more than I have here without an off track, but it's not gonna help you get through there any quicker. Just so you know that you can actually use a little more road than this if you had to. So let's play this one through. All right, so up into fifth, and now getting ready to downshift into third for turn 5. Turn 5 is another corner that what's the best way to kind of describe what you're wanting to do here through this corner? It's a late apex. You can see your curbing here on the left, and that's kind of what you're aiming to apex at. You want to make sure you're carrying a lot of speed through this corner. You don't want to overslow the car because you're now beginning an uphill, and this is approaching a pretty key area of the track where I think, from what I've seen from other drivers that I've talked to and helped with laps, is this is actually where most time is actually lost in the typical lap. And so I'll try to put as much emphasis on this area of the track as I can. The threshold break point is going to be just after the line. I think that I'm usually just looking at the white line as my reference for threshold break. So I like to get that done before reaching the 2. So you'll see that's going to happen maybe around 60%. So not real hard braking needed there, but still using all of the curbing here on the right to maximize the amount of speed that can be carried through. And holding the brakes there for a fair bit. So what I probably could have done a little differently with braking is I could have maybe braked a little later and maybe a little harder and then eased off. So that could have been probably modulated a little differently, but I think that's pretty typical for me, I think, for where I brake and how hard I brake into this corner. There's going to be the downshift into third, right about toward the end of the braking zone. Now turning in, and as you're turning into this corner, you want to make sure you're using all of the curbing so that the car's not going to run wide here. I think the area where speed is most often lost is when you miss this mark and you run a little bit wide, then you immediately feel like you're in danger of running out into the dirt here. You're just going to delay your throttle, and you're going to find yourself not quite reaching this curb at the optimal speed and the optimal time where you've got to be full throttle by that point. So that's where a lot of speed is going to be lost. And then as you lose that, you cut the momentum, it's going to hurt even more when you're coming up on an uphill, and the car's not going to be able to keep up the speed and build up the speed as much as it needs to. So let's watch this through. All right, so one of the most difficult corners on the track, and another very crucial corner. Like the last corner, you're turning onto an uphill and up the Rahal straight toward the corkscrew. If you cut too much speed here, you will lose quite a bit going up the Rahal straight. So I keep it in 4th gear. I don't shift down. Braking is very quick, just enough to get a quick sharp turn in, but of course you can't see it until you've already crested the hill, and so you've already almost got to be committed to your turning point before you can see where your apex is. So that takes some time and practice to get a feel for where that is. Your goal should be to get back to throttle by or before the apex, and so I'm actually starting to ease on throttle already at that point. And you can actually see I could have cut it just even a little bit closer. This curbing is very unforgiving to hit, and so I usually play it just a little safe there, but I actually had a little bit more space that I could have used there. And I almost always run out and drop a tire into the dirt on the exit of this corner. There's no off track for that, and the car doesn't get loose and slide there. Not a whole lot of turning going on at that point, so it handles that okay. So I've noticed that I almost always put a tire off into the dirt right here. And at least when I've carried the most amount of speed that I like to be able to carry through there. I think that it does make sense to downshift into third when you've got a full tank of fuel, but that's going to vary, I think, based on how you feel and how comfortable you are with that. I find that not having to do the downshift into third, that there's less input going on. I can be focused on the corner and the turn-in point, the apex, and then exit, and not dealing with any unsettling or balanced weight transfer of the car through the downshift point. So it might be easier to be more consistent without having to downshift. Although with a full tank of fuel, and especially as it's hotter, you're going to be slowing the car even more through here. And it might make sense to downshift into third just because the car's just going to feel like it doesn't have enough power to get up the hill here as quickly as it could. So that's something to kind of just get the feel for. And I'm sure I'll find myself downshifting into third as I'm carrying a little less speed through this corner where that's necessary. So let's go ahead and play this one through. Okay, so approaching the hairpin, I'm sorry, not the hairpin, the corkscrew, start from the left and get angled to the right to get a nice straight braking zone from this curbing over to the curbing to the right, where the braking will happen before reaching the apex of the hill. So I like to get the hardest braking done prior to the crest of the hill here. The actual braking point is before you reach the white line. Threshold should be done well before you reach the white line here, and 80% braking, and then letting off braking pretty quickly, because as you reach the crest of the hill, the car is going to lighten up and you can very easily lock them up at that point. So I will be easing off braking really quickly, and then as the car comes back over the hill, I'm actually going to kind of modulate the amount of brake pressure that I need and actually get back to braking a second time. So you see it kind of comes off and then back on a bit, and trying to get the car down to the right amount of speed for this turn-in point, where you can get into a lot of trouble with braking late here, where as you brake and you kind of overload the front tires, you're going to understeer like crazy, and the car will not turn in here. So you've really got to be off the brakes by the time you've committed to your steering input angle here. And at this point, I'm just doing some real light trail braking, just kind of dragging the brakes a little bit, if anything, to kind of help a little bit just with rotation a little bit, but not to the point where it's going to cause the front tires to understeer too much. So aiming to use all of the curbing. You can actually cross into the dirt here a little bit, but I don't like to use it there. I like to just use the curbing. And I think that I'm more likely to use a little bit of dirt on the exit, actually, as I'm trying to straighten out the exit. And I think I do here. I think I'm going to drop a tire into the gravel here just a bit. And as you're getting back to throttle, again, there's another crest that the car comes over. You don't want to be on throttle too heavy here, because it's going to lighten up a lot and you can put the car into a slide. So real light on throttle until the car has kind of come down, the suspension is going to compress, and you've got a lot more weight now and downforce onto the tires where you can get back to throttle. And of course, also being careful not to get back to full throttle as you're on the curb or even into the gravel here, because that could send the car into a spin. So I'm not back to full throttle until I'm actually short shifting from second into third here, and now back to full. All right, so let's play that one through. All right, so setting up for turn 9, the rainy curve, I like to start wide just so that I have a better vision, and also it feels like as you're kind of coming up on this nice camber bankment that you can set up to carry a lot of speed through the rainy curve here. And as I'm coming up to the higher side of the road here, I'm already now just focused on making sure that I can get the car in to the apex where the red curbing is here, as close to that as I can, and just really just it's about keeping your speed up here and not overslowing the car. And I think that it's just a lift on throttle. I don't think I do a lot of braking. If I do any braking at any point, it's because I feel like I might not have lifted enough, and I might trail brake and just maybe tap the brakes lightly if I feel like I'm going to run wide. And I didn't in this case, but it's definitely something that wouldn't be uncommon. So as the car's coming down and you kind of get a feel for how close you're going to reach your apex here, if you feel like you're running just wide, just again lightly tap the brakes and help slow the car a little bit, help get the rotation done that you need at that point, because this is again where you're going to get back to throttle. So as you get to that apex, getting back on throttle and then shifting up into fourth gear at that point in full throttle all the way out, using all of the exit curbing and getting ready for the next corner here on the left here. So let's go ahead and watch that first. All right, so getting the car all the way to the left here again as quickly as you can, and getting to this curbing so that you'll be the car is going to be straightened out and balanced and ready for your turn-in point. So keeping the car in fourth gear all the way through this corner, I don't downshift, and I'm looking to actually kind of early apex. Actually, I like to get to the curbing as early as I can, or at least I'm thinking of getting to it as early as I can, because I find that more often than not, the mistake that I would make here is to just miss this mark and run wide of it. And it feels like the car will understeer a little bit when you least expect it, as you're kind of coming down into the curbing here, and it feels like you'll run wide. And so what I've found myself doing is just focusing on just trying to apex earlier and getting to the curb earlier before the red curbing there, so that I can get to throttle at or just before it. You can get back to full throttle and carry full throttle all the way down into to turn 11 here at this point. So really carrying a lot of speed. So let's go ahead and watch that. All right, so turn 11. Turn 11 is one of the most important corners on the track. It sets up for a good passing zone. If you get a better exit on this corner, it is one of the better passing opportunities on the track. It's very important to get it right. The common mistake here is, again, braking a little late, especially if you've got draft on your opponent that you're setting up to make a pass on. You brake too late, you're going to understeer into this corner. You're not going to get a good exit, and then that will spoil your passing opportunity. So braking a little earlier than you might think, or at least from my experience, it just was always a little earlier than what I felt the car could brake at. So I've been braking and just trying to reach threshold braking prior to getting to the two board here. So if you're aiming to threshold brake at or soon after the white line here, then that's a good mark. It is a very hard braking zone. So we're going to go to about 80% braking here real quickly, and then start to ease off again, as you're slowing the car, you're going to have less and less traction. So you've got to start to ease off the brakes to avoid locking up. Now in this case, I went off a little abruptly and then had to come back on a little bit. So that wasn't the best braking technique there, but I managed to get back to brake and get the car slowed to the right amount of speed by the turn-in point. Being patient on turn-in, so using all of the curbing here, or not necessarily all of it, but you could use more than what I'm using here, and being patient on turn in because it's a very sharp corner. I think it's a little bit more than a 90-degree corner. I think it's 100 or 110 degree corner. I'm not sure exactly. So it's a little bit more of a 90-degree turn, but you don't want to apex too soon with the red curbing here. Now it's actually possible to straddle the red curbing with your tire coming just to the left of it and not getting off track, but I wouldn't recommend doing that. Very, very hard to hit that consistently, and it's not really going to set you up for a better exit because you're going to have the car kind of pointing a little bit more to the right than you would like. So even while it's possible to actually put to kind of straddle that curbing, I wouldn't say it's even faster. It's just kind of interesting that I found that you could do that. Really, it's a late apex, so the car's apexing just past or toward the tail end of the red curbing here, and you want to get as much rotation done in as short amount of time as possible to get back to throttle. So as you're coming through, trail braking into it, just aim to get as close to the curbing as you can, get your rotation done, and then as you come off the curbing, starting to get back to throttle, and you want to get to full throttle by the time you reach the curbing here to the right, but you can slide pretty quickly here if you're too eager on throttle, or if you find yourself running wider than you should be, and you're coming off into the green. I'm not sure what the material is there. You're going to slide really quickly if you cross over this curbing and you're on throttle. So if you find yourself running wide, you're going to have to delay your throttle, and again, you're not going to have a great run off this corner if you run wide. So avoid crossing the curbing here. And as long as you haven't run too wide, you should be at full throttle by the time you reach this curbing here to the right. All right, so there's a lap of Laguna Seca. Hope it's helpful. Talk to you later.